Hi, I'm Kimberly Butler and welcome to my vlog. Discrimination in the media, it's rampant. We talk to Mary Alice Williams, Carol Jenkins, and get their take on how women and minorities are deeply affected.
The invisible majority, the 51% of women in this country who still are treated like a minority, a special interest. If you go to anyone these days, they treat people of color, who are indeed a minority, a small segment of our population, and women in the same batch, you know, when women are actually the majority. So this sort of, how do we change that perception that women's issues are minority issues, are special interest issues, as opposed to the main issues of our country?
This is a very interesting statistic. At the beginning, when I started getting calls to go on television, I would often turn them down and say, yo, you know what, like they'd call and they say, can you talk about this? I'd say, you know what, I'm really not sure I'm qualified to talk about that. Like, I'm not sure I know that much about it. Men don't do that. Men will never turn down a TV spot. A friend told me about an organization called SheSource, which tracks female pundits on the air versus male pundits, and sort of has done studies showing that women are more likely to demur, more likely to say, oh no, I'm not qualified to speak on that, when, in my experience, watching and participating on certain cable news shows, I realize that, you know, I'm pretty well prepared, and sometimes the person I'm on with doesn't really know what they're talking about.
That's our job, to speak for the women who are in the system. If they're working for corporate America, corporate media, then they have probably restrictions about what they can say and can't say. I had a contract. I couldn't say anything unless the PR department of the network said that I could. There are a lot of women who say things like, I am not a feminist, and they say it on the air because they've bought into the negative spin of what feminism is about. And if you say to them, you mean you don't believe in equality for women? You don't think that you should be paid as much as the person you're sitting next to? You know, be given the same opportunity to rise to the top? You want to stay in this subservient position? Of course they'd say no. You know, but feminism to them means that you hate men, you know, that you have an axe to grind. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about equality, plain and simple. Whether you're a man or a woman, you should have an equal shot. Whether you're black or white, a person of color or not, you should have an equal shot at opportunity in this country.
A reporter who really cares and consistently does good work is going to find work in journalism, and yes, in television journalism. Now, if another person who works as hard, has as much passion, and turns out as much good work, is deemed to be more physically attractive, that person is likely to get more job opportunities and to make more money. That is undeniable. It is still more difficult for women to make their way up on the journalistic ladder. Not nearly as difficult as it once was. But thanks to pioneers, Barbara Walters for one, Diane Sawyer, who does excellent work for another, that these pathfinders have made it easier for women. But I'm not here to argue that it's as easy for a woman to be judged on the merits of her work than it is a man. We haven't reached that nirvana yet, but we're closer to it than we were when I first broke into the business by a long way.
Now, for the most part, once you hit 40, it's over. But, or 45 or 50, they keep pushing the line back. When I started as a television reporter when I was a teenager, they said, well, you better go on the air now because, you know, once you turn 25, it's over. Because women's voice will never carry authority. A woman's voice will never carry authority. Bite me. Now, of course, we have many women in their 60s who are just doing a fabulous job and who are not flavor of the month and who are no longer the babes that they used to be, though we all think of ourselves as babes, of course. It's not so much that anymore. You have to be a compelling storyteller. It is about the story.
Viewers had never seen a woman in a really powerful position in the news, and that was the Katie Couric experience. Before Katie Couric, there was no universal experience of having your life and your source of information depend on a woman. We didn't even know what women looked like. You know, we were looking at their legs, their hair, their whatever. I always say we're like a nation of teenage boys. We do not know what to do when a woman walks into the room. So how does Katie Couric differ from Barbara Walters, her predecessor? Well, Barbara Walters was run out of town.
The only way that I could do an interview that had great substance was if I got it myself. If I got it myself, I could do it outside of the studio.
Same thing happened to Connie Chung when she dared to co-anchor. The thought that Katie Couric could get the position all to herself was really the dividing line. You may not like her as an anchor, but it doesn't mean that she's not qualified.
Women have a different view of things than men. It's not a better view or a worse view, it's a different view. And it takes all of us and all of our perspectives to make good editorial content. In terms of editorial control of the stories she selects, she's gonna be more likely to do a story that connects to all women and children, all single mothers with children, than perhaps a man would, not because she's better than a man. It's a different perspective.
We've made extraordinary advances, even though we do a lot of complaining here at the Women's Media Center and what we call pitching a fit, our advocacy work. It was created by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, Robin Morgan, three progressive, feminist, activist writers who looked at mainstream media mostly and saw that women were not participating in the percentages that they should, and that the representation of women was not what it should be. A lot of the sexism in the media that we talk about, or just the pure absence, the invisibility of women. Mm-hmm. So they decided that it was time now to create a mechanism for dealing with that. And when we first started, we're only 4 years old, but when we first started, people said, there is no sexism in the media. We don't need an organization dealing with that. What do you mean? And of course, as we began to document the instances, people kept saying, wow, you know, I guess you're right. And certainly, when Hillary Clinton ran for president, we found many, many instances. And that's when we did our sexism cells, but we're not buying video.
Her hair looked, just to be cosmetic, her hair looked great, she looked great. What's she wearing tonight? Whatever you say about Obama, his wife looked perfect.
Thousands of people signing our petitions because they saw quite clearly that a woman who was aspiring to the highest office in this country was at a disadvantage when it came to the media.
Thanks for watching. Join us for Discrimination in the Medium, Part 2, next time.